bounce around. So.
All right. And so I'm going to just introduce a little bit about what Aruba does and our partnership with TNS. So TNS and Aruba have been in partnership since about 2010. And so the relationship's been extremely good and strong over the years, but we realized with what we refer to as Gen Mobile that there is a whole new set of rules to the game, and there's a whole new set of problems, and largely because of what we refer to as Gen Mobile, everything is changing. It's not just the number of users that are connecting to a network, but it's the number of devices that every single user is bringing onto the network. So a lot of what we're going to cover here is what we refer to as the 4 S's. This is 3 of them right here. And so obviously you have the 802.11ac and client match. Client match is a patented piece of technology that Aruba has. And it enables us to move away from the problem that you get from most other access points, which is called sticky clients. And any sort of client that sticks to an access point, and as that access point begins to roam, draws that network down, which we have a solution for. AppRF being able to understand the applications that are connecting to the network, so it's not just a device that's connecting and understanding that this is an Apple versus a Droid versus a PC, but understanding exactly what that traffic looks like, and then air group. So some of the statistics that we see, this is why it makes sense for us to have classes like this. This is that shift that leads us into what we call Gen Mobile. I would say some of these statistics have even changed. I believe this was pulled from about 9 months ago. So 65% of people have 3 or more devices. That's an easy one. Most of us have 2 cell phones, or a cell phone and a laptop and a tablet, etc. You roll that into your home office, you start looking at all the different devices you have in there, especially if you have kids. But then you take that into the office, and that presents the problem that we're all stuck with, which is how do we have a wireless network that enables us to handle not only all the employees, but all the different devices that they have, and be able to differentiate between a professional device versus a personal device. 29% said that they would give up coffee before a smartphone. That's another one where, I mean, people say they can't live without coffee. So I just think it's a funny statistic. But the 84% are giving up desktops. I don't know how many of you are seeing that in the field, but for us, we do a lot of cost comparisons to what it is to drop cabling to have Ethernet ports at every single desktop rather than an office handing out a laptop and enabling someone just to be able to work remotely from home or from different areas within the office. This is also another huge thing of it. Apps coming out all the time. So when our users, both customers and employees, know that they can just go to an app store, they can immediately download a new app. They can immediately get an update. The same kind of thing is now becoming a problem for us because we realize that they're becoming more intelligent. They're becoming more like an IT person as well because they want everything on demand and they want it right now because they can do what they can do within an app store. They want to be able to pull that into their office, and that presents a problem because we need to make sure that we can have an office that can handle that kind of responsiveness. Wi-Fi at every pause. That's what we think of when you see all those people walk around like little zombies, just playing around on their phone. Whether it's work-related or personal-related, if they're playing on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, it almost doesn't make a difference. That's their end-user experience, and that's all that they really care about. And so for us, we need to make sure that we understand that you can have Wi-Fi constantly up and running without issues. And the sticky client issue that I brought up, as you begin to run into situations like that, that pulls that network down, and to be Wi-Fi at every pause, that's when people are going to call you guys up and say, hey, the Wi-Fi's not working, or I had a dropped call, things like that. And then the frequent device refresh. How many times do you go out and buy a new device yourself? That's the same issue that everybody's dealing with. And if you do go out and buy a new device, how do you bring that device back onto the network? How do you make sure it's secure on the network? Things like that. So the challenge is more devices than capacity. Like I said, this is not just a person connecting to the network any longer. It's a person plus 3 devices or 4 devices or more. I realize I broke out that quick. The roaming decisions, the sticky client. This is automated, isn't it?
I'm not sure.
So right, the roaming decisions. The devices are always going to connect to the access point. That's that sticky client issue. They're going to want to stay connected as long as possible because that's how our devices are made. So we need an access point to be more intelligent than that, to be able to let our devices roam seamlessly through the network. QoS doesn't work when apps are obscured, wireless layer security being inadequate. These are all problems that we're all probably facing today. And these are problems that with 802.11ac and with the technology that we bake into all of our access point is really kind of what differentiates us from the net, from everybody else out there, and enables you guys to have, I guess, an easier response time or shorter response time or more likelihood that you're going to be able to remediate issues whether there are issues or not. And like I said, with as many people are being able to understand what's going on in the network just because of the App Store or the Droid Store, they're wanting that same kind of responsive time. So we're going to cover stable air, we're going to cover secure air, we're going to cover simple air, and we're going to cover smart air. So these are just some of the topics that all relate into what 802.11ac does, and with the more robust pipeline, with the more robust throughput and bandwidth, all of these could be either issues, or these could all be major positives on your network. I'm going to hand that over to you now. Any questions with regards to?
So Mr. asked a question, how many of you guys have mobile users? Of course, in the company, all of you have laptops. I know, Baron, you guys have a bunch of tablet users, iPad users. But how many of you have users that bring laptops and iPads and phones from home and allowed on your network? Do you treat them any differently than you do the ones that are your devices?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have a way to treat them any differently?
Yes.
Good. That's kind of, I wanted to touch on that. It's a key point, because even as an admin myself, that's something I struggled with. The user goes and says, hey, I got a new iPad from home, and I want to use it to get my email, my corporate email. Why should I trust that? It goes home. I don't have control over it, because it's not a corporately owned entity. That's something that AC is going to be helping with, some of the things that you mentioned with the smart air. I think Dan will jump into that a little bit later. Basically, I want to start out with what is AC 2.11ac. According to IEEE, this is basically a standard for all, you notice, 802.11, this is all wireless. Basically, they're saying it's the agreement and exchange of information from a local metropolitan area, the purpose to improve wireless local area network traffic for users. For basic service set, throughput exchange. And that's a key one, and I think there's going to be some other things that AC brings us later that Dan will touch on, and we can talk about that. So the first question, I guess, with AC, how did we get here? Kind of a history lesson. If we look at here, we've got 802.11a. These are 40 meg channels, or 20 meg channels we were allowed to use. Just a Uni 1, Uni 2 breakdown. This does not cover all of the channels we have, but you can see we've got quite a few. Well, then N showed up. Notice how we're now using basically 2 of the 20 blocks. Now we've got 40. Some of the things we're using currently today. Some vendors are also being able to pair some of these a little bit, or they'll share across that. I know Aruba does it, Cisco does it, pretty much every vendor does it in their own little way of taking advantage of potentially grabbing more data space. But what are we doing with AC? What's that going to do to us as we go forward? I think this is the big one. Dan's going to talk more on what they call Wave 1 and Wave 2. These are two different versions. Currently we're in Wave 1 of AC. You're getting 80 megahertz channels is what you're able to do. Wave 2 is going to be that 160. That sounds great, but the thing we have to look for is, you notice we're getting fewer and fewer channels that we're seeing that are going to be available. This is something that's going to be a thing to watch. One of the things to watch as you deploy AC in your environments. And the reason is if you've got a high density environment, you've got a ton of APs, they may end up bumping into each other and causing themselves to change channels a little bit. Some of that crosstalk, again, the smart air stuff that we'll talk about later. This is in the United States, is what I'm showing you here. This is different you look at Europe, they have different standards. And the reason that we're having issues in the United States is the government also balances out the channels that are next to these are something like weather stations and also your airport's radar signals. And the government says, you can't touch those. If you're around, you're putting a jump on one of those channels around the airport, they will find you and they will send somebody to you and turn off your gear, and you have a very big fine to pay. Europe, they're a little more lax on that. They allow you to do some of the weather channels and some other ones as they go. There are conversations that if you do some reading, some research on that right now, that the US government is actually being requested on in to say, hey, can you help expand us to help all vendors get to more channels up here on Wave 2 as that comes along. Another way to kind of show high throughput and very high throughput, how we're handling, this is Wave 1. Again, we're kind of building these different blocks of data. These are 20 megahertz, so now we've got an 80. The Wave 1 is also doing another 80 blocks. They can use some of that. They're basically getting you to 160, but not really. Wave 2 will get you all the way up there, in theory. So the biggest question for me when I was excited when I saw what 802.11ac is going to do, hey, more speeds, faster, I no longer need my cable plugged into me anymore. So is that true, was my question. I got all excited. I came back from Aruba's event a couple years ago and went, gotta have it, this is going to change the world. It is, but the question is, are we really going to get to that 433 megabits or 1.3 gigahertz? Everything you're seeing is done in the perfect lab environment. These speeds you're seeing, just like anything else we do in the industry. You're going to see faster speeds, but it's not going to be the 1.3. None of us have a perfect lab environment where everything's running perfect, every patch is perfect, every machine's got all the right permissions set and unset, and the wireless doesn't have any interference to get to those speeds. So yes, it is there. The piece that we also want to look at is you're having to take 3 different data streams of 433 megabits per stream. Dan will probably talk a little bit more on this, but most APs will do 8 streams or more. So that is, again, achievable, but that's if I'm the only one talking. Nobody else is trying to get speeds on that same area with me. With the gigabit speeds as well, you're going to be, you're also going to be limited by what your device will do. If I have a end device and I want to talk on an AC network, sure I can connect, but I'm limited to my end device. I can't just all of a sudden talk on an AC speeds. It's not going to happen. With beamforming, this is something that Aruba does, and I don't know really how the other vendors are handling it. This is a neat piece of technology. Right now with M, we pretty much just send out a signal. With AC, it's going to be able to do kind of a, hey, I can tell where you're sitting, so I'm going to communicate when I do across my signal towards your environment, towards you. It's going to help strengthen that connection a little bit, give you a better signal, better strength, better working experience with AC. Something that's key coming forward. For me, I had a question of backwards compatibility. What happens to my current users? B, G, A. There were some legacy. I think those are pretty much gone in today's environment. N. Is it going to work? Yeah, it will work. But again, I'm limited by that previous device. So it is going to be backwards compatible. We'll support older Wi-Fi technologies. If I purchase today, I'm really purchasing for tomorrow. Because there is not a ton of clients' devices out there running AC yet. A year ago we saw a few, there's more and more now, and I'm sure by next year when Wave 2 is expected to be on the market, you'll see pretty much everything coming out is going to be AC only. You won't see it anymore. As I mentioned, speeds are the other issue we've got to look at. This is going back to our cores. We look and say, hey, I've got this brand new AC instant device. I threw it on my network. It's out here, we've got an AP up on the wall. I should be now getting my quick speeds. Well, you know what, in the back room I'm only running a 10100 switch. That's my bottleneck. No longer am I going to be able to serve them speeds unless I look at my core. What's my core doing as well in the back of my network? With that, are we going to be going to get that wiring? Another big thing I'm excited about. Hey, I don't need a cable to every one of my desktops, as you mentioned. I'm saving my money. Dan will touch on this more too. With Wave 1, depending on the access point you purchase, it may only need 1 cable. But Wave 2 and a lot of Wave 1s, I need 2 to the AP. So now I have 2 cables in my core that I have to go to each individual access point. So be careful with that. You might say, hey, I've got 48 port switch, I'm going to put in 48 APs, I'm good. You might not be. You may have just doubled your network core that you need to handle those APs depending on the device. And I'll let Dan kind of go from here.
So just, a little more history on this, like just wireless in general, touch on more that Dustin was talking about. I wore the worst shirt for recording today too. Checkered shirts are it's gonna wreak havoc on that. So back in 2004, this is BG type, very first A, then we moved to N with the 125s, and now ours, we have the AP225. We shipped this in June last year. We were one of the first vendors to ship an AC enterprise quality access point. So one of the things is AC is new. It's new for a lot of vendors. I'll say for Aruba, AC is tested and tried. We've been doing this for over a year now, shipping AC access points, and they're pretty solid. So for us, it's not really a new thing. This is something you'll see in a minute. I'll talk about our products and our roadmaps. We are going AC across that roadmap. So this is something that the reason we're doing that is the clients. There's certainly a lot more end clients today just because of legacy devices, but if you look at any new device coming out, that new device has AC on it. So, you know, the one is the people bring up like iPhone, iPad. So iPhone, iPad today, the ones they ship today, have N on there. Apple will probably ship a new one this year, and all their other products have AC on them. We look at in the Android space, most of their phones have AC on them. So all the Apple laptops, Dell, Lenovo, AC on there. So anything new coming out right now is AC. And so this is an important discussion to have, because yeah, you still do have a lot of legacy, but the things people are buying today, and the refresh rates are, it's a different world we're living in, right? Particularly smartphones, where folks are almost getting new ones yearly. 2 years kind of, I mean, I'm a 2-year guy, right? I'll wait till my contract expires and stuff like that. But the carriers now are starting to do things where they're enticing folks. I mean, they're paying for it over time, but so they can get a new phone every year. Okay, so these refresh cycles are much different, and that's why AC is important, and that's why it's important to look at it today, because in days past, we used to be able to think we had this 3-year buffer, right, or so. But now these, particularly with smartphones, they move much quicker. As Dustin talked about, we have the wider channels for throughput. The 80 megahertz channels certainly help. I'll talk more about the 160 channels. The bottom line for folks in any type of business environment, basically a non-home environment, 160 channels are probably not anything you're going to deal with. Okay, because 160 you have 2 channels. You're basically back into the problem we had with the 2.4 space. 2.4 you have 3 channels you can live on, and so if you have more than 3 APs, things start getting a little tricky. And if you have neighbors that have wireless 2.4, it gets even trickier because you can't control them. So all things considered, for the one, because of some government political issues, the 160 or gigahertz channel are basically kind of going to be home user stuff as it sits today. Now maybe that changes and politicians adjust things and stuff like that, or bureaucrats.
Hold your
or
breath for
whoever.
that one, right?
Say it again.
Hold your breath for that one.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
Right. Because they move so quickly, right? Want to help out the people. All right, and but one of the things with AC, even with end clients, is you get better performance for everybody, because the name of the game in wireless is I need to get the data to the user and get them off so I can get to the next user, so I can service the next user, get him or her off as quickly as possible. And what AC gives you is that ability to do that. So in all reality, you know, a lot of your clients may be N, but an AC-AP still benefits you, because in order to support AC, the gigabit speeds, we have to put some faster processors and larger buffers on these APs. What that translates to for an end client is that data gets to that end client as fast as possible, as fast as that end client can handle it. I can get it to them, and I can get them off and move on to the next person.
Real quick, I can say we've actually tested in clients in AC environments,
Yep.
and the performance increase was almost 50%. So it isn't just AC devices that are going to see improvements in an AC environment. The in clients increase is actually substantial enough to where it should make sense, you know, and that's why I think we're seeing such a quick move.
And I'll talk about something. Dave mentioned earlier, AC is a little more expensive, and that was true a while ago. Right now, today, from Aruba, our AC access points, in fact, our 205, I'll talk about in a minute, it's the same exact price as a 105. The 105's a 11N radio, the 205's are 11AC radio. They're both the exact same price. So there really isn't a price, price is not the issue at that point. And then this is, the AC chipsets coming out for devices like phones and laptops. And this is why they're actually popping up on devices right now, particularly like smartphones, is the chipsets actually perform better for battery life, which is for all these vendors, Apple and Samsung and HTC, that's their big thing, right? Is I need that battery to last as long as possible, but I need the best performance for the user. So these chipsets provide it. That's why AC is showing up on these chipsets. And that's why it's going to accelerate that these devices are using these chipsets. So, because mobile batteries is the big thing. I spent 12 and a half years at Apple, and I tell these other guys, Apple's like crazy about battery stuff. I mean, they've got big, huge teams of guys that do nothing but battery stuff. It's crazy. But HTC and Samsung and these guys, same thing. Because they need that phone to last as long as possible for that user with the best performance. So AC is ratified in Wave 1. We've heard a lot about that. This is kind of, you know, what Zach was talking about here. Some of the things, it uses the modulation is a little bit larger. So that, I mean, that's basically kind of how much data it can pack. But this is, you know, at 120 feet, so N has kind of the same thing. Obviously, the closer you are to the radio, the better performance you're going to have. The further you move from it, lower the performance. And so, in this case, we're saying twice fast Ethernet speeds at 120 feet. So, you're relatively close to it. Getting that. Otherwise, you're still getting great coverage. So here's the 802.11 AC clients here. We have 400. The one missing from here that usually people bring up is, you know, I mean, probably what you deal with your users is iOS devices. So iOS devices are not AC right now, but it's just a matter of time before that happens. But we see most of the big laptop vendors, and then actually all the large Android vendors are AC. And so, you know, if your users walk into the AT&T or Verizon store, they're probably going to walk out with, you know, probably has 5 now, but one of these devices that is AC. The other thing, and I'm going to actually talk quite a bit more about this. One of the things with AC Wave 1 and why it's probably a good idea to start looking at that now and not necessarily say, I'm going to wait till Wave 2. Now, when I talk about Wave 2 here, I'm not disparaging Wave 2 at all. Wave 2 is going to be great, and there's lots of really, really neat features in there. The problem is Wave 2 is going to require some infrastructure changes. Because we move from AC Wave 1 is 1.7 gigabit, Wave 2 is 3.9 gigabit. So you think about that, Dustin kind of touched on this for a minute, about behind the wireless part of an access point, there's a wire. And so I can lag 2 gigabit ports together, so effectively get 2 gig. But at Wave 2, I'm 3.9 gig, right? So even lagging 2 ports together is still not enough, right? Well, I don't know that vendors are going to put on 4 ports, right? Then you're going to have a big cooler fan on the back. So what we may be looking at is actually a newer Ethernet standard that's in between gig and 10 gig. Something like 2.5. But then you can lag those ports together to get around a 5 gig that will take care of the 3.9. So when the other thing is AC Wave 1, we can still use PoE. Wave 2 is going to be absolute PoE plus. Wave 1 even, on some of our APs, we operate in a PoE or a PoE plus mode. If we're in a PoE mode, there's some things we turn off for power. On our 225s, it's our highest capacity, 11 AC. If you're in a PoE mode, things like the USB port are disabled. There's a USB port on the APs. And then some, one of the 2.4 radios is, but part of that is just because there's that faster processor, larger buffers, it's going to require more power. So this is another reason why Wave 1, AC Wave 1 is actually a really good idea right now. Because you can get these higher speeds with using the same infrastructure. We don't, the problem is with Wave 2, we don't totally know the infrastructure requirements. But if you just do math, you can figure it out. What we have today is to backhaul that 3.9 gig. It's going to take more than just 2 gigabit Ethernet cables. So, and then we actually have a number of large deployments. The new 49ers stadium, that's all AC, outdoor too, which is really neat. You see some large universities. Locally, we have Utah State, and they're deploying an N AC. I'll show you kind of their the migration they're doing. But the point is with that is in particularly many of these universities, AC is being used in high density environments. So I got auditoriums because AC I can handle that client and get them off, get to the next guy real quick. So because of speed. But with our 11AC 205 AP, it's a lower density AP, same price as an N. It's a great option to do. Then you future-proof yourself there. Yeah, so this is the thing with 49ers. They're gonna have almost 70,000 folks, and they're doing live video streaming. They're doing all kinds of really neat stuff. Ordering in the stadium. Pretty crazy.
Touch on the medical portion. Is there a different requirement for
No,
medical facilities?
no. I think these are just different markets. One of the things with with just AC and just Wi-Fi in general in there is that again, we can service the client. We can move on to the next client quicker. Just because the AP performs better, and that's the name of the game. So clients aren't waiting. Some other things, more on this, probably we're talking about is more like client match stuff, where we're, particularly in kind of healthcare, you'll get some devices that are not, they're usually hardware type devices that have a specific task.
Right.
They tend to not be as intelligent on Wi-Fi as, say, a laptop because of limited resources, right?
Right.
And so they tend to not do things like roam well. They'll attach to an AP and they'll want to hold on to it for a long time. And so client match, which I'll talk about in a minute, is that we help entice the devices to roam. Because the roaming in a Wi-Fi is completely device dependent. That iPad makes the decision, not the AP. And so in the case of like medical devices that are purpose-built and they don't have the space for the intelligence of, say, a laptop, to make those roaming decisions or the complex roaming decisions, they may hold on for a while. The problem is as I move, the signal degrades and performance degrades, device drops off, they have problems, things like that. So client match, what we try to do is help the device make a better decision, because ultimately the device makes a decision.
And client match, is that the access point?
It's software in the access points.
And
And that's an Aruba specific thing. This is just
Sure.
And within that, you're keeping the connection. You're just helping them
Right.
get a faster one. That's
Right. It's
another
not a
big key there.
disconnect.
It's not a disconnect. You're not helping them fade and lose. You're saying, hey, for instance, I could be sticky means I'm here and I can go walk the other end of this office space. Well, I know there's an AP right by the front door. My phone or my device will still say, no, I still see I'm here, and he doesn't realize there's a closer connection to me that I get a better speed. especially in a phone calls, you see this a lot. I spent 7 years in the medical industry, so I know some of the older tech that's there. They're running, X-rays, or a mobile X-ray card or a CT card, or
Right.
some kind of a scanning system, and they're going to be on the wireless. Well, if they associate with their old one and I move, and now I need to get to a report, it's gone. I either lose it, and now my system's crashed, it's lost the connection. What Dan's talking about is within the technologies, you're going to say, well, hey, I see you've moved. I'm going to hand your session more or less over to this other guy, and your speed's going to be connected. They're going to do it within their environment, so you're not dropping that connection. And that's a piece to talk about.
I mean, again, like I said, these devices, they make the decision to roam. And like on the case of like the sticky clients, as you walk there, because it still sees a signal, there's like a trigger kind of that when it gets to this level, companies like Apple won't tell you what that is. But at a certain point, then it decides to roam. The problem is sometimes that signal may be really poor, where you end up losing data, where you basically drop and then you have to and it's reconnected. And so client match, before that, the other thing client match does too that helps us, in addition to just sticky clients, helps load balance. So, like, let's say we have an AP in here, 30 of us in here, we all have 3 devices, we all fire them up. And that one AP there is, it's getting lit on fire, while that one over, it's right outside is, doesn't have anything to do. So what client match helps also is direct some of the clients over here directed to load balancing. So, did you have a comment? Or a
Yeah,
question?
so if this technology, is that only with your new APs, or is it firmware that's going into old?
It's OS, so it is in there. There are a couple, depending on the generation of AP, it's not in there, but it's an OS. You guys run
We're on
Instant?
105s.
105 Instant?
Yep.
Yeah, I think you should be able to get that. You need to go to 4.0, Instant 4.0 or greater.
We're already there.
So, to turn it on, you go into System,
Okay.
and then you'll see it says Enable. Actually, no, it may be RF, and then it says Enable. Client match is disabled by default, so you just turn it on.
Okay.
Then the other thing it does in Instant, and also the controller, is you end up getting you now have a visual interface where you can click on a client and you can see their client match trends, so you can see when they were hopping APs or moving to APs and why. So it'll give you a blue or a red to tell you whether they did it, whether like they made the choice or they dropped and had to go somewhere else. So.
Where does it show that?
Well, once you enable client match, then when you just click on a client along the bottom.
Okay.
Where
In
you
the
have-
monitoring section. Okay.
So to answer your question, long-winded there,
Good.
I don't know if there's anything specifically in AC specific for medical devices, but the fact that it's faster, so we can service clients quicker, and then with, in our case, things like client match, actually AppRF can deal with this, and I'll talk about AppRF. So those are Aruba specific things. So. Yeah, let me talk about the APs. Let me mention something else too with the beamforming. So there was an article on Network World a little while ago, and the guy was talking. So there's another wireless vendor that has talked about beamforming quite a bit, right? And they did it in N. They were doing some stuff in N with beamforming and stuff. Beamforming is now it is part of the 11AC standard. It's not part of the Wave 2, it's not part of Wave 1, it's part of the standard, okay? Now, some chipsets have implemented beamforming in Wave 1, some have not. So you'll read an article that says, hey, 11AC Wave 2 is getting beamforming. For some people it is. For some, depending on the chipset you're using, beamforming is available today with Wave 1. Okay? So a Broadcom chipset has beamforming in it. Aruba's 11AC access points all use Broadcom. So we can offer beamforming in 11AC Wave 1 today. And by the way, almost all client devices, certainly all the big popular ones, use a Broadcom chipset too. So iOS, almost all the Android, basically any smartphone uses a Broadcom chipset. Most of your laptops, all of Apple's do Dell, Lenovo, Broadcom chipset. The other chipset, beamforming is not there yet. So there's a deliberate reason why Aruba chose Broadcom. This is one of them. So, this is our current product set here. We have, actually right now we have, this is, I should have updated, we have a 103H. This is a hospitality. No one here is hospitality, right? You know what I mean? Hospitality, okay, we won't talk about that too much. This is our very bottom end 11, and it's a very low density 103 series. We just introduced the 200, so it's the 205, 204. 204 has external antennas. It's the same exact price as the 105, 104. It's a 2x2, 11 AC. So basically same here, it's AC, that one's 10. Okay. Then we have the 110, this would be the 115, 114. They're 11N, 134, 135, those have been shipping for a while. Then our flagship AP is a 220, 225, 224, 11 AC, 3x3, MIMO, all that stuff. This one is, it actually has 2 gigabit ports on there. The ports can be lagged. This AC access point just has 1 Ethernet.
So can I understand the MIMO 2x2, 3x3, what that really is? Because that's something to look at too as you're pulling. Do everybody understand that? Any questions on that?
Yeah, so it's basically antennas. So the more antennas you have on here, the more clients I can service. I mean, to super simplify it there.
Yep.
So this is highest performance, highest density. And by density, we mean number of clients connected. This is a lower density. It's about a mid-density, medium density to this one. One thing to go along with what Dave was saying about site surveys, he does have a valid point where right now predictive site surveys are actually pretty good, because what in the case of the traditional site surveys where we do those, and sometimes those are needed for cases where, let's say you're in a heavy office complex or like a high-rise, something like that, where there's going to be lots of wireless usage, not by you, but by people around you. So basically interference. Site surveys actually tend to be pretty good there because you can kind of see what's in the air, what you need to be aware of. The predictive ones, and why predictive actually works really good, is traditionally those site surveys have been all based upon coverage. Meaning, I just need to see if I can get a signal from point A to point B, and how, good I can get it then, right? The problem we have now is not so much coverage, and what we plan for is not so much coverage anymore, it's density. I still need to get to point A to point B, but 6 years ago, I had 4 clients in between there. Today, I have about 20. And so that 1 AP doesn't cut it anymore, right? So from point A to point B, I may have to throw in 3 APs right there because of density, because of the amount of clients I'm having to service. Does that make sense? So that's why you can say, and that a predictive site survey is pretty valid. And in fact, it usually gets you about 90% there. You end up usually kind of having to fill in a little bit because of didn't realize this one was a big thick firewall or something, or I have this interference because I'm in a high rise and I've got someone running a bunch of Zigbee stuff. So those tend to be the predictives tend to work out pretty well because we plan for coverage, not so much, or density, not so much coverage and capacity. It's capacity, not coverage. Okay, so this again, the 205. One of the other things too, this is another important reason why you would want to look at, even if you're all end clients, let's say even in the medical practice, you may still be 2.4 in fact, right? this right here is another reason why you want to look at these APs too. So all these APs now have cellular filters on there. Problem is we have these LTE and DAS systems. So the DAS system is basically like, let's say you're in a high rise or in a large building, and AT&T wants to provide better service for your folks in the building. So they'll basically kind of install like cells inside the building. That can cause interference. I mean, you get into, you know, very dense areas with lots of businesses or things that you can find a lot of DAS systems, and this helps with that. So, like in the case of this, why I point this out is like the 205, 204, same price as the 105. 105, because of the generation they do not have the ACC filters on them. So at the same price, you actually, I mean, you're amongst other things, you're also getting this out of the filter. The other thing too that Dustin kind of touched on, and I'll touch on a little bit more. One of the things too to note is even with the 2x2 stuff, like this device here, actually all these phones, these are one antenna. So it can be 2x2, this guy only talks one. Right? So iPads, new iPads have two antennas, older iPads, one antenna. Right? Tablets kind of the same way. Laptops usually have about three. But when we talk about wave 2, AC wave 2, it's a 4-stream. And for the foreseeable future, the laptops, they'll probably still stay at 3. Part of the reason you put 4 on there, one of the biggest battery drains you're going to have on a device is those antennas. And you put more on there, just drains the battery faster. 3 right now is pretty good, you know, you can get relatively good battery life on those with 3. So what I'm saying is with AC wave 2, most of our clients will probably still only need 3 antennas, which doesn't get you all the way to the 3.9. But in the case of 11AC, wave 1s works out really well because it's a 3 spatial spring. We also have outdoor 11AC access points. Is anyone using any outdoor APs? Need for that?
Varian uses, you guys use a different solution for that. It's something we've actually talked about out in the parking lot. They have a requirement for coverage out there.
Okay.
You guys do.
So,
I think it's more for your emergency-based systems.
Okay.
actually, I want to talk about this one. This is not only good for indoor, but if you have maybe environments that are a little, like let's say you're a machine shop, something that needs a little bit more hardened device. So what folks may do otherwise is buy an AP and then put a NEMA box around it, or things like that. So this is basically like one of the AP225s, kind of in an outdoor enclosure. But one of the neat things here is that they've used, it can be powered by PoE. The other thing is all the parts they've used are hardened and built for extreme environments. So it doesn't have a heater on it. It doesn't require a heater. It doesn't take a while for it to boot up, you know, because if you have let's say you're in an environment where it is cooler, and if I have a heater, I have to wait for the heater to heat up, then I can boot the device. Because these are hardened here and built, all the components are built for extreme environments, it'll just come right up. Okay. This is the 275, it has an omnidirectional antenna. The 274 has some N-style connectors for external antennas. The other thing is it looks really nice hanging now. It's kind of a lampshade, or sorry, a street lamp look to it, as opposed to previous versions of outdoors is you have a big box just hanging right on the side of your building. It looks kind of weird, maybe not as aesthetically pleasing. And in some cases, this is a requirement for folks because of zoning laws. So, again, it has a cellular filters on it too. So here's the waves. Wave 1, this is where we're sitting right now. The 256 QAM, that's the modulation. Allows us to kind of oversimplify, shove more data in. 80 megahertz channels, allows wider channels, more data, and then beamforming. About 1.7 gig. Wrong button. So wave 2. So wave 2 is still in certification. The certification is expected to happen sometime the end of next year. So we're still roughly a year out on that. The biggest feature and the feature everyone wants is multi-user MIMO. What multi-user MIMO is so let's say I have that AP that has 3 antennas, and I'm talking to, I have 3 antennas, I got a phone that has 1 antenna. This phone's talking to that AP, it has 1 antenna, so it talks to 1 antenna. The other 2 antennas don't do anything. Because it's as Dave kind of mentioned, it's more kind of like a hub. So what multi-user MIMO would allow us to do is this guy's talking 1, takes 1 antenna, these 2 are available to service other clients. So I can service multiple clients at the same time. Again, I mentioned 4 spatial streams versus 3. This is what the point I was making, there's going to be fewer clients. Because your phones are probably, for the foreseeable future, phones are probably going to stay 1 antenna. Again, the issue is 2 issues. One is space. To put more antennas on, I got to make it bigger. The other thing is, I put another antenna on there, I got to deal with battery now. It's going to drain my battery. And so, for the foreseeable future, looks like these will still probably stay 1 antenna. iPads, they may end up going with 2 or 3, but still, it's the name of the game's battery, and to do 3 antennas, I need a bigger battery, I make it a little thicker, and what we're seeing with most vendors are they're trying to make things thinner and smaller, and then laptops again, I mean, you mentioned that, probably still looking at 3, so. And then as I mentioned, the 160 megahertz channels, that's pretty much going to just be home use. They're just, with 2 channels, unless you're a really small outfit and only have 2 APs, it may work, but if you have more than 2 APs, you're going to run into some problems. And so what we'll probably do is wave 2 with 80 megahertz channels. And then, as we've mentioned here, is with a 3.9, the expected max throughput is 2 gig, but the problem you're going to have is backhaul, and that's going to probably require some infrastructure change to backhaul that traffic from the wireless back to your switches. What you may end up seeing is some type of Ethernet standard that sits in between 10 and 1 gigabit, 10 gigabit. 10 gig's still relatively expensive to, put a 10 gigabit interface on an AP, you'll need a bigger heatsink. So what we suggest is, now, we had some competitors that, their message was skip wave 1, wave 2 is what you want. Almost everyone's changed tune now and saying, hey, wave 1's really cool. Everyone should do wave 1. Basically, everyone's saying that. Partly because of these issues here. And again, like I said, I'm not disparaging wave 2. I'm just saying, right now, we can get better performance with wave 1. and then we can start planning for wave 2. Because wave 2 actually is going to have more impact on our environments than wave 1. So right now, today, you could probably swap out your, again, oversimplified, you can swap out your 11N APs to 11AC and really not have much trouble.
And use the same controllers too.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, so for the most part, you could swap it out and be just fine. You could have, on instant, you could have AC access points and N access points in the same cluster. It's really, but wave 2 is going to be a little bit different just because of some of the requirements on the back end. And so this is where my suggestion would be wave 1. You certainly start looking at it today and not, I don't know if I would deploy N unless I had an absolute bulletproof reason to deploy N today. I'd deploy 11AC because it's fully backwards compatible with 11N and you get better performance. And then start planning for wave 2. Both situations, I've got a table here, both situations, whether you're at wave 1, 11AC wave 1 or 11N, to go to wave 2, you're talking new hardware. So one thing that should be mentioned is wave 1 hardware, it's not a firmware change to get to wave 2, because this is going to require hardware change. So as you start planning here, think about this. This doesn't come out till, I mean, it's expected to be certified in 2015. So this one was around June 2013. We came out with an AP right around June 225, which we've shipped for a year. So figure first APs next year. And so we're about a year in right now on 11AC, and it's going really hard. Like, we sell lots and lots of 11AC gear right now. We've been a year, okay? So when you start looking at the time frame here, it may not make sense to say, well, I'm just going to stick with N and then skip up to wave 2, because you're looking at, 2016, maybe more before you go. And so then you start doing the math on 11N. Right now, all the new clients coming out are AC. You're going to have an 11N network that's starting to get really stale by the time you get over here. But all your clients are sitting here. So when you start looking at this one's requiring new hardware, whether you're wave 1 or N. This one gets you better performance today and for the foreseeable future till we get here, and can deal with the infrastructure issues. Does that make sense? So I kind of put together, actually I probably should have done red on the projection. Red on black. Looks good on the screen, but so anyway, I kind of went through here, just yes, no. I mean, your modulation, wave 1, wave 2, yes. 80 megahertz channels, yes. Beamforming, yes on both. In 11N, if it's available, it's non-standard. It's not part of the 11N standard. Can utilize existing wire infrastructure, and wave 1 can. Wave 2, as far as we know, it's not going to support that at this point. Current new devices, they're going to be wave 1. There's very few, if any, devices right now that are 11N. Certainly no consumer-based devices are coming out 11N. If they are 11N, it may be some highly specialized type devices. Single purpose, kind of black box devices. And in fact, and to be honest with you, a lot of those are still doing 2.4. So, multi-user MIMO, this is an 11AC wave 2 thing. Better performance and range. You ought, with 11N clients, as we've mentioned over and over again, trying to ingrain that in everyone's mind, is N even see performance increases with AC. You're going to have an 11N network that's starting to get really stale by the time you get over here. but all your clients are sitting here. So when you start looking at this one's requiring new hardware, whether you're Wave 1 or N. This one gets you better performance today and for the foreseeable future till we get to here, and can deal with the infrastructure issues. Does that make sense? So I kind of put together, actually I probably should have done red on the projection. Red on black. Looks good on the screen, but you know. So anyway, I kind of went through here, just yes, no. I mean, your modulation, Wave 1, Wave 2, yes. 80 megahertz channels, yes. Beamforming, yes on both. In 11N, if it's available, it's non-standard. It's not part of the 11N standard. Can utilize existing wire infrastructure, and Wave 1 can. Wave 2, as far as we know, it's not going to support that at this point. Current new devices, they're going to be Wave 1. There's very few, if any, devices right now that are 11N. Certainly no consumer-based devices are coming out 11N. If they are 11N, it may be some highly specialized type devices. Single purpose, kind of black box devices. And in fact, and to be honest with you, a lot of those are still doing 2.4. So, multi-user MIMO, this is an 11AC Wave 2 thing. Better performance and range. You ought, with 11N clients, as we've mentioned over and over again, trying to ingrain that in everyone's mind, is N even see performance increases with AC.
Why does the range improve?
Say it again.
Why does the range improve with the 11N? I mean, with the AC?
Well, so, I mean, the range actually to get the higher throughput, you actually have to be, like we said, like about 120 feet from there, right, to get that higher throughput. The better range is just that the APs can just the performance in the chipsets, the processors, buffers, those things like that. It's just overall better. The 105, like the 105 and the 135, I won't scroll all the way back. Those are 3-4 years old now. So just improvements in, I mean, to be honest with you, the range is not going to be, it's not going to be dramatically different than this. I threw this in at the same. I mean, really the performance is better. When you have those users at the closer performance, closer to the AP, I can get data to them faster than I can to the guy out there. What that means to the guy out here is I'm done with this guy, I can get to you. Yeah, so as was mentioned here, the Wave 2, it's not upgradable from N or Wave 1. So you're buying new hardware to go to Wave 2. We support 2.4. As far as we know, I mean, there's no reason Wave 2 won't support 2.4, but it's just there's no APs because the standard's not. So I mean, the assumption will be that the APs will have 2.4 support on the Wave 2, just because there's still a number of specialized devices that have it on there, but we don't know fully. So, 5 gigahertz, certainly they all support 5 gigahertz. So migration best practices here, and so this is why I don't think you'd want to say, I'm just going to wait for Wave 2. Because again, as I mentioned, you're going to have clients that are AC, you're going to need performance now. You're going to have customers complaining or users complaining, and usually it's not the best answer is not, well, wait a couple of years and we're going to have some lock-in APs, right? So kind of the way things have gone, here we have the 105, 135. So what a number of our customers have done with AC Wave 1 is, for low density, this would be like just general office space, classroom space, things like that. I moved the previous high density 11N APs down to my low density areas. So I put them in that office space, which actually works out really nice for the high density because these low density areas tend to still be relatively high dense areas, meaning that I have users that have 3+ devices, right? Then I put 11 AC wave 1 APs in high dense areas. So this is pretty common for universities. Classroom space, hallways, things like that, 11N. If I have auditoriums, student centers, conference rooms, 11 AC access points. Because it handles those. So then what I will do with wave 2 then is I'll reuse these, move these down into the low dense space, and then put wave 2 APs in the high density spaces. I mean, this is typically where we get complaints, right, from users. When the guy's at the office at 3 o'clock in the morning and he's the only one on the network, he's usually not complaining unless the thing's totally down, right? Otherwise, they're like, this is awesome, you know, you should come in this early every morning. But it's at 9 a.m. when everyone else shows up that these high dense areas, like Wi-Fi, I hate it. It doesn't work, you know, and it's, you know. So this is why these areas, putting these higher end APs in there are really valuable, and targeting those areas first and then moving to low dense areas. I want to talk about purpose-built APs. We have a competitor, and I'm on the board here, so not a mystery of who the competitor is. But they use access points where they're modular. When the new standard comes out, we'll clip on the awesome new stuff, and then you don't have to buy a whole new AP, right? There's some problems with that. And I'll get to that in just a moment here. So Aruba's view on this is we built purpose-built APs for 11 AC Wave 1, we build them for 11 AC Wave 2, we built them for 11N. And the reason is we can provide the maximum amount of performance for those technologies with purpose-built. Modular, you know, someone may sleep a little bit better thinking, oh, I can put a module on here. But when the day comes that I'm going to actually slap that module on, my performance may not be as awesome. So for instance here, think about this. We have this module that snaps on here. The antenna spacing prior to, so this was a number of years ago when I purchased this, and now years later I'm purchasing this module. This was the antenna spacing at the time. But today, with AC, I may need something like that. Well, I can't move those now, okay? Or how about the uplink, right? For 11N, a 1 gig port's perfect, right? Handle it by great performance. Wave 1 is 1.7 gig, and at 1 gigabit port, and I'm probably only getting about 80% of that, so 800 meg. And so, you know, I mean, right now I have a problem too. So I have some antennas that are not optimally placed. I've got a backhaul now that's not fast enough to deal with the wireless coming out of here. And then the other problem here is processor, right? I got a processor that's a number of years old, but because of the requirements for AC, the heavier requirements, I need a faster processor. And so what we see is we actually see this bear out in tests, where you'll see what happens is we perform much better in higher density environments than the Cisco modular access point. So when there's more clients, because it's purpose-built, we can perform better. Because we have that faster processor, we have the 2 Ethernet ports for the larger backhaul, the antennas are spaced properly, things like that, okay? So this is, the purpose-built stuff is important. You want to be careful on if someone's selling you a modular thing, or, hey, we snap on this neat little thing, and then you can go to wave 2. Just remember that, you know, those requirements for these newer technologies, they require more horsepower because they offer more horsepower. You can't, I mean, it doesn't matter. You can't make it go faster if you don't have that backhaul. You just can't. So we need to take a break. So the smart air stuff. We talked about AC and this is all the stuff I've talked about with AC. This is kind of standards-based stuff, and it's what I'm going to start talking about now is some things that Aruba does on Aruba gear to help clients out, and this is part of our part of the AC access points, whether they're controller or instant. Some of these technologies like client match, you can't get those to work on previous APs, but things like app RF is going to be pretty much kind of a newer AP. Okay. So the idea behind client match, we kind of went over this some, is that these devices make the decisions on where they want to go. And so what we do is we try to entice the device to move to the AP that not only performs better for them, but performs better for everyone else. So anyway, the idea here is we have this client. We see this AP is loaded. This one's not. So in addition to, for this client in general, it may perform better here, but also for these two clients, it may be better performance on this AP if this guy moves over here too. So client match is more just sticky client type. It certainly helps solve that. So client match is based on ARM, our adaptive radio management, which has been in our gear for a long time. It's where it makes decisions looking at the air. It decides that maybe channel changes, power, things like that. It will adjust those things depending on the environment around it. Oh, there we go. Everything's caught up again. So then it says, hey, hop to this other AP. This is pretty important. Why we bring it out with 11AC is pretty important to get the 11AC data rates. Because if I just have 2 gigabit Ethernet ports lit up on the back here, the other thing I should say is that I don't want anyone to feel like with 11AC, particularly if many of your clients are N, that I can't go to 11AC because I don't have 2 Ethernet ports for my access point. Again, like I said, I would look at, unless you have a real compelling reason not to, I would be buying 11AC access points at this point. Even if you're just connecting with 1 gigabit Ethernet port. Your performance will be better even at that point. But this client match is important for 11AC because I need to move these clients off when they're at these higher data rates. I need to spread it out so I can deal with the backhaul. In the case like here, this is a dashboard from the controller here. We see the majority of our clients are sitting down here. This is their signal to noise ratio. These are, the red is standard, considered bad. After client match, we see we flip-flop this. We have the majority of our clients sitting on this end instead of sitting on that end. So client match is helping these devices make better decisions on what APs are best for their performance. And it should say here, the clients don't always associate that. It's so, why we point out like sticky clients with phones and tablets, they don't have the horsepower nor the resources to make great decisions like a laptop. You know, I mean, when you look back on this, on the previous slide there with the, you know what, that may be the problem. back button. Your laptops are probably sitting up in this area anyway, because they tend to have a little bit more intelligence. One thing that, did you mention this, Zach? One thing that is really interesting in the world we live in today, Aruba now is completely wireless, not only for network devices, but also phone devices. So there are not connected phones.
And more companies are actually, I've seen a few reference requests for companies that if you're building out a new office and you realize that most of your employees are going to be on laptops, a MacBook Air doesn't even come with an Ethernet port, and that they're going to be using their mobile phone for the most part anyway, that, you know, why even run Cat5 to individual cubes or offices, what have you, and just do the wire drops for the APs and run an entirely wireless environment.
Well, a lot of, I mean, so like, this would be the unified communications, like Link, Microsoft Link, right? So, again, to Greg's point here is, every employee I have probably has one of these sitting in their pocket, right? So I'm gonna put a phone on their desk that, I mean, they'll probably prefer to use this one when they're using it anyway, you know? So when I start doing things like Link on these devices, this is where wireless and wireless performance becomes really, really important. I think in the medical space, I mean, they do a lot of the, you know,
Communications, yeah.
yeah, the little
Dictations and everything.
communication devices
Yeah,
and
hang
stuff
off their
like that.
necks.
So, I mean, this stuff is heading into the workspace right now where, I mean, I think in the very near future, you're gonna see cubicles instead of the cubicle without the desktop there and just the phone, you're gonna just have basically an empty cubicle.
A desk and a chair.
Yeah. You know, even then, I mean, even now, I mean, you get in these hip new startups, they don't even have desks, they have like couches and
Pods and
yeah,
all sorts of
beanbag chairs and stuff, so, you know. So, these are some of the wireless cases that we really haven't dealt with, right, in the past, because by and large, wireless in the past has been, let's get a laptop on and, you know, when I'm moving from conference room to conference room. But now I've got folks that, it doesn't matter where they're standing in the building, they need a wireless signal, because that's their phone, right? The other thing that's causing this is these projectors now, with things like Apple TVs, Chromecast, Amazon Fires, you know, name those devices. Your user, like usually it's like a C-level type, like your CEO or CFO or someone bought an Apple TV for home, and like, this thing's so awesome, I'm taking this to the office. And they're gonna put it in and then, all right, I wanna project my iPad up on the screen, and when they do, then it either doesn't work or the Wi-Fi can't handle it or something like that. But these are use cases we haven't been dealing with in the past. These are things that are, I mean, this happens all the time. We get people talking to us all the time about, yeah, my CEO has a Apple TV that he wants to project now. Or or he has this, and now he's dictating that all our projectors have this on.
And now he wants it in the conference room.
Right. Every conference room now has it, you know. You gotta make it work, right?
That's what
So that leads into our old model of VLANs for, you know, VoIP, or VLANs for video, or VLANs for, these devices doesn't make sense anymore, because they do things like Apple TV, use things like Link. So these VLANs, separating everything out in the VLAN doesn't really work in this wireless space. This is where Aruba really does, really performs well. So the other thing too is that with something like Link is, all of a sudden now I'm now taking very important voice calls and putting them on my wireless network. And I've got a CEO that's got to make this important call. And in the next room over, I've got, you know, some kids over there that are looking at Facebook, Vine, watching all the videos, their Twitter, downloading videos, things like that, watching all those, and the CEO's trying to talk on the phone, and it's chopping up because the guys that are supposed to be working over here are laughing at Sports Center commercials. So this is where AppRF comes in. I have applications that are mission critical. I need to guarantee performance for them. So in our controller-based and our instant platforms, we have a technology called AppRF. This is layer 7 DPI type technology, where we can look at the traffic, and then we can make policy decisions based upon that. Making a link call, I'm going to prioritize your traffic. Mess around on Facebook, I'm going to deprioritize it. So that phone call gets through and offer a better quality of service. Facebook, I'm going to make them wait a little bit to download that video. Maybe I make it so painful he waits till he gets home. But we have the ability to, in fact, we're a partner with Microsoft on Link. We're certified, one of the certified wireless vendors. And we tie in, actually we can tie in with their SDN API, where we can look at, you know, this is a type of link packet, let's prioritize it. It's a voice packet, let's move this one along, give it a higher quality of service. But I can take all these, all this information I get and add into the firewall. So I can offer quality of service. I can block traffic. And I could say, I want you going to Facebook. Or like a guest network here, like I could say, guys, guest network is great, but I'm gonna, if you go to Facebook, you're gonna only get like 20K. Because that's the other problem is, sometimes is if you have a corporate network and a guest network, your employees will try to go to the guest network so they can check Facebook, something like that. So, and you don't really want them on the guest network when they're using a corporate device. So how it works here is traffic here. We look at it and then we can prioritize, like for instance, Link, Box, and then things like Skype. It's a pretty neat little interface. Actually, I think I show a picture of it here in just a moment. You can see, so this is BitTorrent type thing, so we can just completely block that. This is the interface. You'll see this is the hardware-based controller, but the instant controller, virtual controller, has a very similar interface for this. 105 is just AppRF's not available, so you need to have 135 or greater. But so looking at this, I can see application categories. I can see a lot of streaming here. This streaming is probably Netflix. I can see where it's heading to. See the type of devices. I can also, with Instant, and it's coming to the controller, we have the ability to look at, it ties in with some third parties on whether it's a trusted or an untrusted site. So if it's, if they're going to like Pirate Bay, I can build a policy around that because it may show up as an untrusted site. But this allows me to peek in and look at things like that. Like you see, in here too, you'll see, this may be, I can't read what that one says, that may be like MDNS, so if they're doing like Apple TV or Chromecast, DLNA stuff, it'll show up in there.
Hey Dan, in a lot of ways you can take some of the firewall technologies to the edge, facing your wireless environment with this kind of technology. Is that what you're looking to do?
Yeah, well, it allows us to just make some decisions down closer to the user. I mean, we can tie in with, we can tie in with, because a lot of times people look at this and go, oh, hey, I got this firewall that does it. We do tie in with some firewall vendors so that we can look at the whole pattern there. But the big thing is I can make a decision in what what a lot of folks really are looking at this for is I can make QoS decisions on the Wi-Fi at the Wi-Fi end. Further up the stream I can do it, but by that time my call's already chopping up, right? So I can do this right now. The firewall, everyone in here has kind of been running Aruba, right? So you're familiar with, we have a stateful firewall. Allows us to make policy decisions. We're not VLAN bound. We can deal with VLANs, but we're not VLAN bound, meaning that our security doesn't based upon you're an X VLAN. You get assigned a role, and that role we can give different privileges and rights to. So Air Group 2.0 is the other thing I want to talk about, because this is something that if you're not dealing with it, you will deal with it shortly. So these are Apple TV, Chromecast. The problem with these devices in a wireless environment is the way they broadcast is multicast. So when you plug in an Apple TV and you have an iPad or a Mac laptop, the Apple TV starts blowing out multicast. And hey, everybody, I'm an Apple TV, here I am, and the laptop actually ends up blowing some out too and looking for, every time it wants to find an Apple TV, hey, is there an Apple TV out there? And it just spews multicast everywhere. In a home environment, perfect, right? I mean, I got 10 devices, it'll be fine, right? And that's the problem, is those Apple TVs are built for a home environment. They're not built for an office or an enterprise network, right? But folks buy them and bring them in. So the problem is multicast on an enterprise environment. There's a couple problems. One is it blows all this traffic all over the place, and I have more than 12 devices. I may have a user that has 12 devices, right? So I start adding that up, it degrades performance. So multicast is one, the amount of traffic multicast, and I'm saying Apple TVs, but DLNA and UPnP, same problems. How they advertise is, I mean, back in the day we used to bang on, you know, Apple Talk and IPX for being chatty. That's how you advertise, right? The nice thing about Apple Talk and IPX was I could open up a browser and find all my devices, right? With TCP/IP, I had to know an IP address. So the trade-off is, if I want to be able to find my device through discovery, I need to be a little chattier. But that causes problems in wireless environments because it's shared medium. So multicast, the other problem with multicast is it doesn't cross subnets. So I have an Apple TV that's plugged into a wired connection. So the Apple TVs have an Ethernet port. So let's say I decide I'm going to wire these, I don't want them on wireless. Then the guys connect it to my wireless network. They're not on the same VLANs, or they're different subnets. And I can't find my Apple TV. Or let's just say I have a larger campus, or for whatever reason I have multiple subnets. Apple TVs are in one, wireless, my clients are in another one. These are all valid issues, right? And these devices are built for a home where typical homes don't even have VLANs, right? It's just one LAN. There's no concept of that. So what Air Group does is a couple things. One is it solves the multicast chatty issue by when that Apple TV or Chromecast or whatever Fire comes up. Air Group, and by the way, Air Group is is available for both instant and controller. It says to those devices, stop multicast, I'll advertise for you. We're going to now start unicast. So then that Apple TV, that Chromecast, and they stop spewing out multicast. And so then in effect the controller becomes kind of a Bonjour gateway or DLNA gateway, where when that iPad or the Mac pops up and says, hey, I'm looking for Apple TVs, the controller responds with a unicast, not multicast, with a unicast that says, hey, we're doing unicast, and here's a list of Apple TVs I know about. And then the client can make the connection after that. The other thing too, because it's a gateway, and that the controller can straddle multiple VLANs, I could have Apple TVs in this VLAN and advertise it in this VLAN over here. So when the wireless users are over here with an iPad, they could see an Apple TV that's in a VLAN over here, because that controller can straddle both ways. If I look at using ClearPass, ClearPass is is an advanced AAA server we have. It does radius, TAGX, allows you to do 802.1x. One of the other things that works with Air Group is I can do context-based scoping. So I can do neat things like, I have an Apple TV here, but it's in the CEO's office, or I have a Chromecast. And the problem with those in a VLAN, if I can see them on the VLAN, is, or if they're just connected to the VLAN, anyone can see them, right? So then I have to put a password on them and tell the CEO and tell him not to tell anyone, but then they usually write it on the board. Apple TV password, and then as you're walking by, you see the passcode saying, I can connect that. Universities, this was a problem. Because there would be kids that would stand outside the classroom. And the way Apple works is last guy wins, so last guy to connect knocks everyone else off. And so anyways, it was kind of funny. Not for the folks sitting in there, but the concept's funny. But so what ClearPass would allow you to do is scope this down to say, this Apple TV is only viewable by folks in a C-level group in Active Directory. So when your CEO authenticates with his username and password, ClearPass can say, oh, I see you're in this group, you get to see this Apple TV. And so just Joe average employee could be standing right in that conference room and not see the Apple TV. Because with ClearPass I can scope it. I can also scope it by location. So if I have a large building and multiple Apple TVs or Chromecasts, if someone's on the west end of the building and I have an Apple TV on the east end, I don't want them seeing that. I only want them to see Apple TVs on this side. So I can scope it based upon location. Now this is part of ClearPass. ClearPass this is not part of the controller. You need ClearPass to do that. What the controller is going to offer you is the VLAN straddling and the ability to reduce multicast traffic. So ClearPass, in addition to that, it has a policy engine in there that you're able to, one of the ways you can get around, or a lot of folks do deal with BYOD, is that instead of just doing a 802.1x username and password, which that username and password I can input into a BYOD device, so I can put it on my phone and connect up and be, you know, I get the same privileges that my corporate issued laptop gives me, right? So with ClearPass and the policy engine, what I can do is I can say, you can log in, but because I don't know this device, you get to log in. But now I'm going to give you a role that you only get to go outside the firewall with this device. I log in with my laptop, I get full access internally. But as far as the user's concerned, they don't really know. They think they're, oh yeah, I'm on the corporate network. But I'm not really, because I'm being pushed outside. Because on this device, I'm probably only checking Facebook. I'm not doing any real work here. Here's a few case I kind of mentioned about universities. This is universities, and the reason why I realize, I mean, we don't necessarily have any universities in here, but part of the reason why I want to talk about these guys is that this is that's what universities deal with, and that's why this information is important for everyone else, is they deal with very, very high density. And their users are crazy. I mean, now 15,000 users, and every one of them has at least 3 devices, right? I mean, it's insane in these environments where, in an office space, because of different generations of users, some users may be heavy on devices, others may not. But at universities, it's, so you have 15,000 users, you multiply that by 3, 50,000 devices on your network, wireless network. And the other thing to think about too, these devices don't ever really turn off, right? They're always connected to a wireless.
I think the statistic for incoming freshmen is actually 5.5 devices.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It is ridiculous.
Because the other thing they'll have is like, and if there's dorms on campus, they'll like Xboxes. They'll have multiple Xbox and a Wii and PS4 and crazy 3 printers. But so the idea behind here is, I realize you're not education, but this shows a scale that we can go to. And so 11AC is used, and part of the reason 11AC is used in these university environments, again, is scale. It scales very, very well. It services those end clients, like Xboxes, and older phones, and laptops, and things like that, faster than just with them. Arista, this is very similar to what I just mentioned with Aruba, is they're doing soft phones everywhere. So Aruba's now like that. We don't have wired desk phones, and that the faster, higher performance Wi-Fi is important, because I don't have an option on this or the Android device to plug it into a wire if the Wi-Fi is not good. There's some few other ones. San Diego State and another university. You just cut calls. Let's see, this is kind of long.
Before I jump into this, Dan may even have some questions on this if you guys might have it. How many people have external antennas on some of their APs? I know you guys do it varying, because I've been on your environment. Is everybody aware of how those work? Aruba's got, how many external type antennas do you guys currently have on the new stuff?
3 pages on a PDF.
Yeah, a ton. This is a standard AP. It's an old one, it's a 93, but the form factor is pretty much close to the same. These are designed to be mounted up. And the reason is, when it deploys its signal, it cones out and down. This antenna is an Omni, so it's designed to be mounted straight up like this. Do we know what happens when I do this? What's my signal do? Now I'm changing my signals this way. I'm bringing this up because a lot of places, a lot of time that I spend out as an engineer working on systems, and I'm sure Dan was doing this the same, is people look at external antennas, or even AP, they take this AP and go, you know what, I can't reach that ceiling, I'm going to put it here. Looks like a really good idea. It's got these 2 screw slots in the back, I can just hang it right here. Well, guess what, anybody behind this thing doesn't get anything.
Well, even sometimes we've seen it, particularly like warehouse environments, depending on how they. It's like they'll mount it there, and so the guy over here is okay, but the guy like standing right underneath it doesn't change.
If I'm right here, I'm actually underneath, I'm behind the cone. The cone's more out here, so I'm missing the signal. Same with a lot of these, and I see a lot of these in my environments when I walk out too. They're going to install an antenna, turn it sideways. Well, I didn't have the roof line was in my way, and I don't want to spend the $50 to get a different mount. Well, your signal is now going this way instead of the way it's supposed to, and coning out and down to my customers. Where the bigger piece comes into in Aruba and a lot of the other antennas that are out there in the market, I may have a form factor in some fashion like this. It's going to be a flat device, but what most customers forget or they don't pay attention to is this antenna may already have a predefined tilt angle in it. What I mean by that is inside that it already might be tilted this way to service you put up above. But then the customer goes, well, I don't know that antenna is tilted, so I see this flat device, I've got to turn it even more. That internal antenna now might be like this. So be careful whenever you are looking at antennas or you're in an environment, make sure you know what that antenna is going to do and how it's going to broadcast. because that will change your environment completely as to what it can and can't do.
So for Aruba devices, basically, anything that has an internal antenna is made to be mounted on the ceiling.
Like this, he's meaning one of these, an AP.
And
It's
so
not mounted above you, straight up.
And if you have to do where you're shooting sideways, you know, which is perfectly legitimate, we have like sectorized antennas that will, so that Omni would, you know, do something like that, but we have antennas that sectorize that will shoot, like, let's say you're trying to shoot between two buildings, something like that. You're gonna look at like sectorized antennas, you're basically gonna point them, and it's going to direct
It's going to
that
shape its
antenna
signal in the direction
or
you want
that
it to go.
energy into where it needs to go, so. We see that a lot is actually folks will mount the APs that should be mounted on the ceiling on the wall. And if you're gonna mount them on the wall, what you should do is buy, so like, the 205 is meant to be mounted on the ceiling because it has internal antennas. If you're gonna mount on the wall by the 204, then pick up one of those Omnis, mount it on the wall like that.
Yeah, because you could do, like the ceiling like this, you could put it in the plenum with the external antennas, or, you know, you could use the internal antenna one, and, you know, sometimes cosmetics come into it as well, depending on where you're mounting it, but it's definitely worth thinking about before you, you know, decide to go with one AP over another.
And that's another big thing I've seen. People do have these drop ceilings, they go, I don't want them to know I have an AP right here, so I'm gonna put it up above. I'm gonna lay it like this. Now I'm shooting even worse directions. So be aware of that. And those are things we see, and it's simple fixes if you understand just the simple, what it's doing, what's it designed to do. So I wanted to touch on that for everybody on that one real quick, because those are some things that we run into as we do.
So what about interference from access points that are too close together?
So ideally, like in an office space, I mean, for ARM, which is, so in an Aruba environment, for the most part, really, the best practice is to turn on ARM, and it is on by default. I mean, you go turn it off. But on by default is usually let ARM make the channel decisions and power decisions and things like that, because for the most part, it does a pretty good job. You usually want your APs about, particularly like if you're mounting on a ceiling, about 40 feet apart. Keep them about 40 feet apart, you should be good. So that's kind of a general office space. If you got lots of thick concrete walls or you know, maybe lots and lots of glass, then your environment may change. It may not be 40 feet at that point. But in something like this kind of, you know, I got a cubicle farm, some conference
Sheetrock
rooms,
walls.
sheetrock walls, stuff like that, you're looking at about 40 feet apart.
Dan touched on an interesting one there, that one that I found as an engineer I didn't think of. Concrete to all of us is the obvious concept that's going to be the biggest blocker of our signal. But actually glass is a huge deflector of wireless signal. I've actually saw this at a customer we had here in town. I actually went out, it was one of the hotels in town, they had a glass conference room and said, well, hey, AP's right in the hallway. I get really great signal. The minute I walk in my conference room, it's horrible. I went, you got a glass wall you're going through. They didn't know. They figured I can see through it, but my signal can't. It actually bounces and refracts off that wall. So put them again. Think of that when you're doing areas. Don't be afraid. For me, I've become pretty much, if I have a conference room, I'm putting an AP in the conference room. I don't care if there's another one outside the hall next to the cube farm. I'm gonna make sure that AP dedicates that room and takes care of it.
So usually what's nice, if you put one in a conference room, it'll, you know, and you have some in the hallway, it bleeds out in the hallway. So, and typically conference rooms are kind of, they either open up into or beside cube farms. And so the benefit is when this conference room's not being used, the guys sitting out there get the benefit of more, you know, another AP to connect to, provides better performance. So the glass is huge now actually, because it seems like all the new construction, particularly kind of any like type of startup company,
Yep.
like every room is just there are just glass walls everywhere, and so it's, you know, it's, I don't know. Something you gotta think
I
about.
did a deployment of Instant up in Park City for a brand new startup up there in one of the gorgeous new complexes, and they have a cube farm in the middle, and every office is glass, so they can see their employees. I mean, that's great, guys, but this is the challenge you just created for yourselves. They went, oh, unaware of it. They don't think of that. And that's something I'll touch on. I think Dan's probably seeing a lot more of, and I know I am as an engineer. Businesses are starting to get the engineering guys, the IT guys involved when they design the new space. Because technology is playing such a big role in that, when what it can and can't do, and wireless is only going to make that even a bigger issue for us. If we're not involved, they're going to come back later and go, well, this works horribly. Well, you didn't tell me you were doing all this. You just gave me a space.
So the predictive tools that we use to, when we plan space, so like when they mentioned Scott will do the heat maps and stuff, those predictive tools, we can draw a wall and then we can label the wall as glass or concrete or drywall, and the predictive tool then will adjust the heat map based upon those walls, and so then we can roughly know, like, we can see a conference room that's surrounded in glass that maybe we need to adjust the AP placement.
With that, we're going to go through some general best practices, and I know this is all some things that Dan touched on and I've even done a little bit earlier, but things you want to look at when you're going to do, AC. We mentioned, can you simply rip and replace? Yeah, wave one to a certain degree you can if you're using N. Be careful. Again, you're going to be doing what your AP is going to be. Do I need 2 cables or 1? I mean, what are you going to be moving to? So your density challenges, you're looking at what apps are you running? That's another big one. Being able to control those apps and what are they going to be doing? Am I just doing a Word document or am I doing an Apple TV now? What's my load going to be? What do I have to do there with that?
And actually the bigger one in this space, sorry to...
No, please.
Is if you are looking at doing something like Link, some type of unified communication system where there's soft phones on mobile devices, that's where one-to-one may not work, because I may need more APs to provide the coverage for the density. So I may not just be able to say, well, I'll just take this N1 down and put an AC one up. When I'm doing Link, if there's a gap in coverage, I'm going to drop a call. So these are other things to think about. That I mean, the one-to-one I get is probably better than nothing, but this is where the application you're using actually becomes important on your planning for how you're going to build out your Wi-Fi.
Existing infrastructure, again, we're talking about gig uplinks. We're going to quickly overload that on the new APs. And their speeds are going to be faster. It's the same concept like Dan was saying. Can I handle it? If not, great. Port availability as well. Again, we've touched on this. 1 or 2, maybe even more, depending on what happens.
Yeah, so the 205, the AP 205 are low density, medium density, 11AC AP. Works just fine with 8023 AF or just PoE. The 225, the high-end 11AC, will work PoE or PoE plus. If you do PoE, there's a USB port that's disabled. That USB port allows you to connect in things like a data card. If you, let's say you have like a truck or something that you're hauling this in, you could put a cellular data card on that AP for the backhaul. So that USB port would be disabled, and then it disables one of the 2.4 radios on there. But the 5 gigahertz, everything runs just fine. But it disables those for power. So if you're going to do 225, 11AT is something, or sorry, 802.3AT, PoE plus is something you want to look at. You can deal with just a plain PoE environment, but just recognize that there are some trade-offs. That being said, if you don't have a lot of 2.4 devices, certainly you're in an office space like this right here, where our 2.4 devices are probably very, very limited. That's not a concern. In a warehouse though, where you make like all your devices, scan guns are 2.4, that's something you may want to consider with those 225s. Now, that being said, in a warehouse you probably wouldn't do 225s because scanners, we tend to not have high density of those. There's 15, 20 of them, and so they tend to be all right. But just something to consider. So 2.4 is something that is absolutely needed.
And continuing, One-to-one, again, look at you asked about capacities, 2,500 square feet apart. Best practices, again, depending on your density and how many people and how many devices you've got, you may need a bit more there to cover that. Going to be existing network, as Dan just mentioned, ABG, do I have to support that? If I do, I got to make a decision there. Am I only doing N? Then yeah, you're probably going to be easier to get to that AC if that's the environment you've got. But otherwise, it could be a redesign that we've got to look at. And it's not just your AP cables, switches, things like that. You've got to look at what are they going to handle for us. As Dan just mentioned, power. This is a big one. Extending on that, we may think, hey, I've got an AP and I've got PoE, great. The biggest part I also see customers make the mistake. They say, I've got a PoE switch and it produces X amount of power. You can overload your PoE switch with PoE devices, depending on the amount of power they pull. So take, again, look at your back end. Will my switch handle the density of APs I'm going to put on it? If not, APs aren't going to work. You're going to have a few that just won't work, or they'll intermittently work and change, which is going to affect